Arsenal versus West Brom. Yes, I forgot to put the mic in place. That is how things are happening right now. Hope you can hear me live and clear. Hope you can hear me well. Arsenal back in the Premier League action after what feels a long time. It's only been 6 days or so since we obviously beat Brighton in our second win in a row. But I don't know, I'm getting used to playing games within like 3 days of each other, and then we have to wait 5 days. And all of a sudden, it feels like an absolute eternity. So it's good that football's back. It's good that Arsenal's back. And hopefully, Arsenal can pick up their 3rd win in a row. Hello and welcome to the Goon Talk, back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Raw Reaction Preview Series, show which we look ahead to the next Arsenal game. Get your thoughts in our live chat, look at the predicted lineups and get score predictions out there into the voids, and get your thoughts, of course, as always. Welcome chat box, happy new year. This is the first kind of live show I've been able to do this year. I've been able to talk to you guys in the chat box. Specifically, we released 2 shows yesterday. The first one was our Let's Talk Arsenal show every single Tuesday and Friday at 5 p.m. and I was joined by Graham Hunter, Spanish football journalist, author, presenter, etc, etc. Fantastic guest, knows his stuff, very passionate about the situation of Arteta, and explained why it's very important to give the guy time. So if you haven't given that a listen yet, it's really genuinely worth listening to Graham's thoughts on Arteta. He challenges me with my questions all the time, so it's a pleasure to speak to him. And of course, we also released a show which explained how Arsenal will be affected by Brexit. I know that doesn't sound like the most exciting thing in the world, but it's important that you educate yourself about Arsenal and Brexit and how things change, why Arsenal did certain things in the summer 2020 window, and why Arsenal will not be able to do those same things ever again, or indefinitely until the UK ever, if it ever does, join the EU. This is how things will be from now on. So make sure you check out that video. It gives you all the information that you need to know about Arsenal specifically. But let's crack on with today's video and talk about West Brom, who are in a very, very difficult situation. They obviously employed Sam Allardyce to try and drag themselves up this relegation battle. It's not really gone to plan exactly. They won a point Liverpool, which is fantastic for themselves. When they actually can be defensively solid, they look very good. But they have got the fact that they concede a lot of goals within them. They conceded 3 against Chelsea after going 3-0 up. They conceded 5 in their last match against, I believe it was Leeds. So it's so much can go wrong for this West Brom team. And when you consider where they are in the table, the players they have available, and who their coach is, you can only really, in my view, see them setting up one way. Arsenal have struggled prolifically to break down these low defensive sides, and West Brom can play like that. And this is why it has to be Arsenal's prerogative to attack with intensity in the first 15 minutes of this game. If Arsenal can get an early goal in the match against Brom, the rest hopefully should take care of itself, because West Brom will need to come out, they will need to attack, they will need to try and find that equaliser, and Arsenal should just be able to pick them off. If we don't get an early goal, or at least a goal in the first half, things are going to get extremely difficult. Allardyce will only play the way that he knows. If it's still 0-0 into the second half, he will start adding defensive players to the team. And there's always the threat that one of their attacking players, be it Robinson or Grant, can come through and attack Arsenal like we know they can do. It's a really worrying situation. It's a really, really worrying situation that Arsenal have got to be aware of. I'm just hoping, fingers crossed, they can get through that, no problem. Chat box, hope you're well. Make sure you throw some of your questions and thoughts onto the predicted lineup, which I'll throw onto your screen right now. There we go. So, looking at West Brom in particular, I'm hoping I've not done the thing that I did before by putting 2 of the same player. Yeah, I just wasn't awake. These early morning previews are not the ideal. I'm just going to go around so you can see the team. Okay, so predicted 11. Grant up, of course, someone that has not really been able to hit the ground running in the Premier League necessarily, but he's backed up by a few very decent players. Robinson has been able to score a few goals. Dean Garner, of course, was a real kind of star of the Championship last year. Gallagher, who they managed to get from Chelsea after spending last season on loan with Charlton. My other half was absolutely gutted that they lost Gallagher in the end because he was a fantastic player for them. They lost him about halfway through the season. He went off to join Swansea, finished the season in the Championship last year, has now made the step up to the Premier League, but he is a Chelsea loan. Sawyers, who of course scored that really quite comedic own goal last week from about 5 yards out, curled it past Johnston in goal, who of course we expect to start this game too. Kieran Gibbs is the only kind of risky selection in here. I'm not sure if he's going to be fit or not. We know Kieran Gibbs, of course, from his Arsenal, but he might be actually replaced, depending on, of course, which they choose to go with, whether it's Peters or Peltier, or someone else. And when you're looking at Gibbs, he's an attacking fullback. He's got a red card on him. We've seen that this season, but he knows Arsenal. He knows us pretty well. If he actually managed to get on the team sheet today, it's going to be interesting to see how he affects us. O'Shea and Ajayi at the back, Furlong at right. Could be Ivanovic, but Furlong started the last 2 matches for Allardyce's side. And Johnston in goal. Not too much to talk about regarding West Brom. It's a difficult one. I'm not in the know about West Brom whatsoever. Looking at their previous kind of lineups and fixtures and how things have gone, I can't see too many changes happening. Arsenal's lineup is a very, very easy one for me to pick. This is the lineup for me that started obviously against Chelsea. I believe it's pretty much everyone man for man. It has to be the same. And enough time, enough rest, enough training sessions for these guys to be fit and ready for this game. 6 days is plenty of time to recoup and rejig yourselves and get back in kind of thought and feeling about where you need to be. Lacazette, Martinelli, Emile Smith-Rowe as a front four have been fantastic in all the games they've played. Lacazette looks like he's on it again, back in the goals. Confidence is flowing. He has those finishing boots on again, which is great to see. Behind Emile Smith-Rowe, we're going with Xhaka, we're going with El Neni, Tim Marie, Holding, Bellerin and Leno. It's the same exact team that went up against Chelsea. We have but weeks away until we'll see Thomas Partey back in the lineup, and we will be absolutely buzzing to see Thomas Partey return to the team. And also Gabriel will be back after this game. Marie has done very, very well. I can't imagine that Gabriel will not be ousted by Marie for too long. Maybe he'll get a game or two over and then Gabriel will be phased back in. Maybe we'll see 2 left-footed centre-backs come into the team, which is very interesting. But Gabriel, for me, is just seemingly too good to drop. Although, saying that, his last couple of appearances before the red card, he did slightly dip in form. Let's see what you guys are saying in the chat box. Owen says, Aubameyang out, brave. Sure, will Arteta be that brave either? That is the big one, of course. Aubameyang not being in the team, he didn't deserve to be in the team for me. He didn't deserve to. He came back in against Brighton because of pure rotation. He didn't offer us too much. He's a poach. And at the moment, we need players that are going to work hard. And especially against someone like Brom, Lacazette, for me, is going to give us that. And you can't drop a player who's in form. Dropping a player like Lacazette now makes no sense considering how good his form has been. Martinelli, interesting one. You could maybe drop Martinelli for Aubameyang, but I think the fan base would absolutely go mental if they saw that Aubameyang would be starting over Martinelli, if Martinelli was starting at all. They want to see the Brazilian playing. They want to see him getting as many minutes as possible because he is the electric spark that this team is missing for so long, alongside, of course, Emile Smith-Rowe. Mino says, I think that Aubameyang will start over Martinelli. I can't disagree with you. I think there's a great chance that we see Aubameyang start over Martinelli, but I personally would love to see Martinelli this game. Manu Clerks says, morning Tom, Holding. If we drop Holding, it demotivates the young players. Same for Marie. I get your point. I think there comes a place in time where a player is too good not to leave out. Gabriel may fit into that bracket, but as I say, a little caveat to that was some of his performances prior to sending off were a little bit lower than what we have expected from the Brazilian, and maybe that means Mari will keep his place. I also think Mari has a good communication with Holding. Those two as a pair are quite good. And just touching on Holding very briefly, I saw so much criticism of the club for offering Holding a new contract. We have moaned time and time again about the club not protecting the value of players, allowing players' contracts to run down to nothing to the point where they just leave or effectively zero. Arsenal are doing that by extending his deal. I've then seen people come back with the devil's advocate of saying, "I'll just give him a 1 year extension." A 1 year extension. What 26-year-old is going to accept a 1 year extension? This contract is his last one before he goes into his 30s. At 26 years of age, it's going to extension probably up to 5 years. But we'll see him play up to Arsenal until he's 31. And he's a good defender. He's not world class. He's not unbelievable. He is good. I'm not saying that Arsenal shouldn't be looking to upgrade on him, but you need to sign these players that are playing consistent, and he has played consistently. I can think of 2 games where Holding has not played particularly well. That's Aston Villa at home, and that's Spurs. But the Spurs game has a couple of, I suppose Liverpool comes into it, but with those 2 games, Spurs and Liverpool, one, Bellerin just completely left Holding absent and on his own and independent to deal with a left-back in Robertson, Arne, and had to deal with Reguilon and Son against Spurs. Because Bellerin just completely left him. But other than those games, he has looked really good this season. He's been consistent. He hasn't really put a foot wrong. And he's been able to deal with crosses that we've had to deal with. He clears the ball really well. He tackles really well. Yes, his passing is something that needs to be worked on. Yes, his distribution needs to be a little bit better. That's not part of his game. And hopefully, in the end, we'll end up upgrading on Rob Holding. But to slam by on social media, to jump on and put your thoughts there into the ether about that Holding should not be given a new contract, it's just a load of rubbish. It's just a load of absolute rubbish. Are both Willian and Luis available for selection at Tamoy? Yes, they are. They're both back in training. It'll be interesting to see if either of those 2 players starts. Karthik, have a feeling Pepe might get a start. Holding is good, and if nothing, as a backup, says Martina. I agree with you. Melisma says, I agree. Pepe seems like a starter for this one. Pepe could come in, of course, for Saka. I'm just playing the same team as the time we played Chelsea because for me it's too good to drop. If everyone's fit, play them, in my view. Tamoy says William, Mustafi and Louise should not be included in the team sheet. I am in complete agreement with you. Dan Dada says we don't need this for this game. Ainsley Maitland-Niles, Willock should be... I mean, Ainsley Maitland-Niles is arguably a DM if you're playing him in midfield. So, but Willock, I kind of understand that. Maybe you put Danny Sebastian over El Neni, possibly. But I think that sometimes we underestimate the need for these types of players in these games, and we need that base to stop the counter and to nullify that. Xhaka is important for his passing. El Neni's a little bit more of a one you could swap. Matt says that he would swap Danny for El Neni, so that's one. I think that El Neni is probably arguably the most kind of easily changeable in this pitch. Gustavo says, what do you think about Chambers to get some minutes? I think Chambers is probably going to go on loan in January. I think that's something the club will probably be looking at. He's come back off a long injury. Mustafi's going to be staying to the end of the season from what it looks like. It doesn't look like he's now going to be going off to Barcelona. We'll see. Maybe they'll wait towards the end of the window to see kind of what centre-backs do leave. But if you look at Arsenal's centre-back kind of selection, we've got Holding, we've Marie, we've got Mustafi, and we've got Gabriel. And beyond that, you've got Chambers who could go on. You've got Saliba who's going to go on loan. You've got Socrates that's probably going to leave. David Luiz is also here as well as an option to the end of the season. So we could send Chambers on loan. We've got enough back and support there that we can afford to send Chambers on loan, get him some minutes and regular game time until the end of the season. Be that to then move him on in the summer, or just to get him that experience and development that he could come maybe as a player that comes in. Hackney Man says, do you know anything about the Saliba day clause? Apparently 5 million if he starts. Where did you see that, Hackney? You have to drop me. Where did you see that? That's interesting. I will talk about Saliba. I've left a link in the description to the article I wrote on Monday. All the news that came out yesterday about Saliba looking like he could leave permanently, I put that in an article on Monday. I told you guys I'd release that exclusive information. I did release that exclusive information, and now L'Equipe is reporting it now. So I very rarely am the type, as you know, long-term listeners of the show, to turn around and go, I told you so. But this time, as someone that did write the piece and got the information from people that I trust, put the piece out there, put the information there, saying that the door was open to a permanent departure. And now that looks like it's the case being written by the wider media. So feel free to click the link in the description to the article that I released on Monday. I'm just going to say it. I said, I did say. Johnny Max says, a Ceballos Xhaka midfield 2 is too immobile. Paul Geyer says, I suspect Ceballos may come in for additional creativity and a bit more rotation in positions due to the general tiredness of the squad. Melisma agrees with Matt, saying, I agree with the philosophy, but have it the other way around. Have Martinelli to tire them, 60th minute, Aubameyang to finish chances with a half-yard more space. I agree. I think that's a really, really good kind of point as well. Let's scroll up to see some of your comments that I missed. Matt, I wouldn't have an issue in starting Aubameyang on the left and bringing Martinelli on in the 60th minute. So that's what Melissa was responding to. So in other words, I told you so. Yeah, but yes, I did. I did tell you. Manu says, would you keep players like El Neni for depth, or could a youngster fill his place like Mainsley or even maybe Aziz in a few years? Well, the thing about El Neni is El Neni has 1 year left on his contract at the end of the season. Arsenal could choose to move him on. Arsenal could choose to just allow him to run down that deal until the end, and then he can move on for free, which is also I don't think you're going to be getting too much money for El Neni. I don't know how much interest there is going to be in him. If there is anything, it's going to be like loans with the obviously buying at the end when his contract runs out. So I don't mind if he stays. He's good depth. He's a decent player. He's not the guy that turns around our midfield. When Partey comes back, El Neni kind of gets near the squad unless he's a partner. And even then, I think Arsenal should be looking to bring in another centre, probably in the summer. But we've seen links to players like Basuma, Jean Jordan, these guys. They're the types of players that Arsenal should be looking at to partner Thomas Partey with. Aziz, I don't like this thing about Aziz right now, because I think as a lot of people putting way too much pressure on a young kid. He's still, 17, 18 years of age? He still needs to develop. He still needs to improve. He needs to be given time in the FA Cup, time in the Europa League next season, or if we ever get into the Europe next season, we'll have to see. We'll have to find out. Samuel says, are you joining the Fraud Father for a watch along? I'll have to wait and see. It's kind of these things I've done pretty last minute, so we'll have to wait and see. No Sleep says, if you look at Europa League games that Ainsley Maitland-Niles played in midfield, he didn't play as a DM. He was more of a box-to-box. It was either ill-disciplined, or is that what Arteta told him to do? I think that you're right in terms of how he played in the Europa League, but if you look at his partner, who he played against or played next to, I think that's probably the reason why. Also, playing in the Premier League, it's slightly different. I still think he'd be more advanced than, say, a Xhaka or an El Neni, but he is ultimately more of a midfielder that then progresses the ball forwards if he's playing in a central midfield position. Davey says, Happy New Year, Tom. Just joined this. What do you think about the Saliba permanent move away? So we've already spoke about it. No problem, mate, George. We did touch on it briefly. There's also an article in the description if you read that about what I've written from last Monday, where I told people about that. Again, told you so. But yeah, it's interesting. Acne Man's people talking about it on Twitter. I couldn't find any actual source, so I have wondered whether in theory. Hackney Man, do you send me a DM at the Green and Talk TV? It's at the top of your screen with the links to those. I'm actually really interested about that. Dubia says, is Partey definitely out? Sorry, a bit late joining. Yes, he's out for this game. He's training, which is good. He joins full training after this match, so maybe we'll see him back for the Palace, Newcastle games, etc. Have to wait and see. Matt says, we must be able to salvage the relationship with Saliba. It will be such a shame to see him go. It is salvageable. If he goes out on loan this year, he comes back in the summer, we give him assurances that he can get more game time in the first team. That's the only way you can assure him of things. Saliba, I'll touch on this. I don't need to throw the line up on it if we're going into questions. The Saliba situation is, to the best of my knowledge, the article that I've posted and published on Monday, this is the information I have. The cup final, the French cup final from the summer, Saliba desperately wanted to play in that. The club tried to come to an agreement with Saint-Etienne about Saliba. They weren't able to find a common ground. Saint-Etienne wanted basically Arsenal to pay money for us to loan Saliba to them, and we wanted them to use a regimented medical procedure to deal with Saliba. Of course, had injury issues throughout the season. None of those things worked for either club, and the deal couldn't be agreed. Saliba was not happy about this, and Saliba really pushed to try and be involved in that cup final. And the way in which he pushed was perceived by the club not to be too professional. And in fact, the way that he acted in those moments to trying to play in the cup final, the club didn't take too kindly to those. And the way in which Saliba acted during those moments has affected how the club used him at the start of the season. If that had been okay, if there had been no issues at all with the cup final, we may have actually seen Saliba play a few minutes in the senior side. But as we've seen, and in the article I used the evidence from Guendouzi, if any player, no matter how young, old, experienced, whatever, however much they cost, any player falls out of line. Any player doesn't go by what the management, what the executives, whatever the club wants the players to do and how they think they should behave. If you step out of line, the club are clearly act upon that very strictly, and they have very clear protocols about how they deal with that. That's Guendouzi's not playing anymore, and it's also bleeding into the Ozil situation as well. We're told that it's football reasons. The club have to say certain things. We're aware of that. But it's going to be interesting to see how that Saliba thing goes at. Beyond that, Saliba obviously then went on to play in the 23s. Saliba feels himself from an interview that he has conducted that has not been published, as far as I'll say on that, that he is basically of the mind that he understands that he has development to do. He understands that he needs to do stuff to learn and improve because he's still only a player. But he feels that the level that he is at, from having played in Liga at Setien, at the highest level of European football, in the top 5 leagues in Europe, playing week out when he was fit for them beyond the season, or before the season that we even signed him, that he is above youth football, which I think is completely fair enough. He is above youth football. He is above that, and he should be getting minutes. But the club have, effectively treated him that way. He is not happy with how he's been treated. Saliba is not in agreement with how he's been treated by the club, and he is open, if the chances to Arsenal are not going to come, to leave on a permanent basis. That is the situation with Saliba. I should also add to that he is still keen to play for Arsenal. He still wants to play for Arsenal. That is not in doubt whatsoever. But if he is not going to be given opportunities for the sake of his own career, he is happy to move on. There you go. That is the information that I have. So there you go. W says, Tom, if it's true about Saliba, I'm gutted. What a waste. Surely we can fix this. Yoni Max says, no way you're trying to make an excuse for him not being in the squad. No, I'm not trying to make an excuse. It's telling you why he's not in the squad. That's exactly what I've just told you. Afternoon, no notification. Well, YouTube doesn't work for some reason. Don't want to get you mentioned anymore, says Martino, which is completely fair enough. Tamoy says, but will Saliba get game time as long as Arteta? It's nothing necessarily to do with Arteta, a personal issue with Saliba. It's kind of the whole situation with him and the club. It's the situation with him and the club. It's about where he's at with his development, where the club believe he's at with his development. Performances that he's put on for the under-23s have been good. He also is, you'd be frustrated if the guy that you're playing next to, and whilst I don't think Fofana is an excuse to play Saliba, if you are Saliba, who was playing with Fofana, and you see him leave for Leicester play week in, week out at a Premier League side, and you feel yourself are better than him, you'd be a bit aggrieved by that. Of course, the two situations at Arsenal and Leicester are very different. The amount of centre-back available to Brendan Rodgers was very different with the injuries that they faced and the amount of centre-backs that they have. So that was always going to affect things. Thapello says, Xhaka disrespected the club. He's still here. I don't care about clean slates. He does not deserve to wear the shirt. Arteta is a disgrace. I don't care. He doesn't care. I'll tell you what's going on behind the scenes with Xhaka is very different to what's happened with a lot of other. Xhaka is very much behind the scenes different to what you see on the surface, and I know for some that's not good enough, and that's completely fair enough, and you're entitled to feel that way. Arteta is very much happy with Xhaka as a player, but the club could move him on in this. That's still a very real possibility that Xhaka is looked upon as a sellable asset that we can upgrade on, and they will still look probably to move him on in the summer. No, Tom, it's a good thing that the club are taking a hard line with players, but they seem inconsistent with it. I.e., they punish Saliba, but not Luiz and Willian. They need to be consistent otherwise. And no, Saliba, I'm 100% agree with you. Consistency is really key and important to how you run a football club. And you have to remember that Arteta is still a very young coach. I think he's done things wrong. I think that's based on inexperience. I think there's inexperience throughout the club, to be honest. And I think mistakes will be made. That's something that will improve and get better with time. So fingers crossed. Do a backflip. I can't. I'm sitting down. The fella says, Xhaka still plays. I'm tired of this. He threw the armband, but we can give clean sheets. Get him out. Okay. I have no issue with people's view of Xhaka at this stage. He has done so many things. There is no argument to say that you're wrong. Like, there's no argument to say that you shouldn't feel aggrieved by Xhaka at all. I don't like the guy. I appreciate him as a footballer and what he can do, but I don't like him as a person. He's a bit of a, you know, a bit of an idiot. In the nicest, most polite way to say it, he's just a bit of a moron. He's a very, very kind of self-assured guy. I have all the respect in the world for his bullying ability, but for his personality, I just don't like him as a person, personally. Owen says, back on a neutral position in regards to Arteta. Owen's getting back. We're clawing him back in, reeling him in. Need to pick up points over the next 4 to 5 fixtures, though. Thibaut says, Saliba has been managed so poorly. If you're a young player and Arsenal is interested in you, you will think twice before committing. And I'm not even talking about our league position. Maybe, Thibaut, what you have to remember is that Arsenal is still a very attractive place for young players. I don't think this will be looked. I think Arsenal will be very clear with players, the situation with what happened and why it happened in that way. That's going to round off today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in, people. Answered a few of your questions regarding Saliba. Hackney, if you could send me a couple of tweets on DM, I'd really appreciate that. We'll be live straight after the game, as always, to react to that. If there's any major news throughout the day, I'll try and cover that too. But as I've mentioned at the start of the show, 2 videos we read yesterday. One, a talk with Graham Hunter about Arteta. Graham very eloquently speaks about why Arteta is very clearly the right man for Arsenal, why kind of opinion around him in a way is a little bit too harsh right now, and he does very well at explaining why Arteta is the right man for Arsenal right now. So if you want to check that out, please. And I also released a show on, of all things, Brexit and how Brexit affects Arsenal, how it affects the way we sign players, what players we can sign, the players that we signed in the summer that will not have been able to be signed now. And Arsenal have actually made a signing, it seems, as well already this summer, Omar Rekik this January. So we have Omar Rekik joining from Hertha Berlin. So that's to be made official, I believe, but it's basically hours, days away now. Thanks so much for tuning in, people. You absolute legends. I will see you again very, 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 very soon. As always, up the Arsenal.